Hello and welcome to the Yggdrasil podcast. I am your host, Tosker. Today we have Limcube on the podcast. Thank you for coming back, Limcube.
Happy to be here again.
I want to make everyone aware, I have finished the main story. I believe, Limcube, you finished the story already yourself?
Yes, I have.
So we might start off talking about more gameplay mechanic type content and stuff like that, and then move on to the more spoilery topics. But I make no promises. We might wander around. This is not going to be a spoiler conscious podcast. So, Limcube, how do you like it? What's your thoughts on the game overall?
Oh man, I don't know where to start, but I've played the game for. I did the math yesterday because I've been streaming my entire playthrough, like basically 100 hours now, which sounds a lot for obviously like basically just over a week now. But at the end of the day, it's my job. In the first 2 days, I played like 14 hours on the days, and I was mostly convinced that it was going to be good. Of course, there were still like some thoughts in my back. Is it going to feel too similar again? Is it not going to feel new enough? And honestly, I still have them in some regards. When it goes like for going forward, maybe I'll get more like tired of this game quicker than I did with Breath of the Wild, because I played Breath of the Wild so much, it being my job, playing like thousands of hours. But I basically had this internal battle for the last like 3 or 4 days where I wanted to decide if this was my favorite casual experience ever or Elden Ring, which it was before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it has, at least for now, might be recency bias, taken the number one spot. So I would say I like the game.
You know, I also had. Okay, so I didn't get it at first. At the very beginning, day one when I was playing, I've also played a long amount of time. I played an embarrassing amount of hours, and so like the first day that I was playing, I was wandering around Hyrule's open world field area. And I hadn't really explored the Skylands, and I haven't really gone into the depths, and I hadn't really engaged with the story. I was just wandering around, and I'm like, this is exactly like Breath of the Wild. Like this is exactly.
Yeah.
It feels exactly like Breath of the Wild. It looks exactly like Breath of the Wild. But then I got to a location that I had been to before. It was like this tree root somewhere south of Hyrule Field, and I go over to the tree root. I think normally there'd just be a Korok there or something, but this time the tree was hollow, and inside of the tree was a large cave network that felt a lot like the cave in Dark Souls 1. You know, the tree root that goes down for a significant amount of time before it ends up somewhere else. And so that happened to me, and then a similar thing happened to me, like when you get back to Lookout Point, like the Lookout town, and the wall has moved, and you're like, hey, what's behind this wall? And then you find the horned statue,
Lord.
and you find
Lord.
this expansive
That broke my brain.
Like it just keeps going and going, and you're just like, when will it stop? Will it ever stop? I'm just like wasting weapon after weapon, breaking through all these rocks. And then finally it ends up, in Hyrule Castle area. I was like, what the hell? That was incredible.
Yeah, I had a pretty similar experience with that cave. But for me, it was I took a lot of time on the Great Skyline at first, because I was like reading the item text, kind of trying to piece together the story. And then I went down into one of the lakes or whatever. And first I saw a cave. This is where I realized, okay, so these caves seem to be like different from what we've seen in ads when it comes to like the really deep caves, which in my mind, there was just really deep caves before I even knew what the depths really were. So okay, these caves are different. I saw like a Horriblin for the first time, new enemy, cool. And then for me, I had a similar experience with the tree route. I came up to like a well. And these wells used to be wells. And sometimes there was like a Korok seed in there. But I looked in the well and you could go in this time. And they would have like something in there, like chests or enemies or like new outfits. And I realized that basically every single well in the game has like something to explore now.
How did you feel about the main abilities that you have that replace the old main abilities, like Ultra Hand, Fuse, Recall? What are your thoughts on those?
I think I get asked a lot about what my favorite one is, and it's basically impossible for me to pick, which I think is a good sign, because they just work so well together. Like we had like magnesis and cryonis in the first game, which were basically super situational. Like sometimes puzzles would be designed around them. Cryon is probably the most forgettable one. But this time, just because they have such amazing synergy, it's hard to pick a favorite. Like I could say, okay, Ultra Hand is like, yeah, you can build all of these cool things and explore. But you can also build things to ascend through, and then you can recall them back on top of you to ascend through again, and then fuse like the entire weapons. So it's like they all work so well together that I can't really pick a favorite.
Yeah, I was surprised at their interconnectivity. They play really well into the shrines. Like the shrines are more like tutorials now, showing you, hey, you can do this. Hey, you can do this. Figure out the puzzle with these limitations. And a lot of the times you can try and avoid the puzzle the intended way. But I noticed like a lot of these shrines are kind of just trying to teach you, hey, look at all of these cool things you can do with your powers that you maybe didn't realize up until this point.
For sure. I am undecided on something when it comes to that idea in general of like giving players multiple options. I think it makes more sense to talk about when we talk about the dungeons, because in some specific areas I almost thought that this time it was almost a downside, where I had all of these ideas how to beat or like overcome a certain challenge. I know the developers like urge you to like do whatever you want. If it's possible, but sometimes I would get like a little unsure if I wanted to do this, or if I would maybe miss out on a puzzle by not following like the path that they want you to take in a way. I feel like I specifically had it happen a lot on like the fire and lightning temple later, so I guess it makes more sense to talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say that. Like I'm actually surprised. This is an opinion that I hold the same opinion. Like I agree with you completely. And I had Monster Maze on the podcast recently, and he said something similar, exactly, almost the same thing to the dungeons specifically. It's weird. I know that the developers are committed to this open design where there are multiple solutions to a puzzle. They want you to be creative. I'm not sure it's a good idea to continue adhering to that philosophy even in dungeon space. Every other section of the game is like that. Like every single other section of the game is already like that. If it makes the game less diverse to make it all that way, you know, it makes the game less different to have every single spot in the game adhere so strictly to that philosophy. So I'm glad to hear you think that. Is there a specific puzzle or dungeon that you have? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to bring that up because like as I was forming that opinion, I was kind of hesitant in my stream to bring it up, because I was expecting a lot of people to be like, oh, but this is like what Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild is all about. It's about that freedom. But I had a surprising amount of people agree with me when it specifically comes to the Fire Temple, because it seemed like you can just climb everywhere. Like you can do that, or you can sit and look at the map for like 15 minutes figuring out how these mine car tracks interconnect, and it just doesn't feel very rewarding if you can like fuse a rocket to your shield or like shield serve along them. And there specifically and giving this away already, I don't know if we want to do like a ranking or whatever. I feel like that ended up making it almost like my least favorite, because it was like a choice between, okay, do I just climb up here, or do I take the tedious route, which won't even feel that rewarding once I figure out how the rails work.
One thing I talk about a lot, or at least I used to in my channel, is that player choice is not an unmitigated good. Like people just they always say something like, well, just don't do that. Like, just don't use that. No, it's not the same thing. The knowledge that you can changes the situation. You know, the knowledge that, okay.
For sure.
I had the same experience in the fire dungeon. There was a final key. I did the whole thing like normally. I tried to follow the developer intent so I can interact with the puzzles. But there was one kind of far away, and I could see it was elevated. I see it was just open to the air. And I'm like, I'm kind of high up where I am. I could probably build a flying contraption with all the stuff around here. Or use auto build or something, and then just head on over there. I could probably just do that. And so I did it. I go over to the last key, and I was like, oh, well, that just took all of it away from me. I would have had to figure out how to navigate through the mine carts all the way back. Like a lot of design choices I could ignore by doing that. And people could say, well, it's good. You should have that choice. No, no, no. If I had done it the correct way, like the developer intended way, it would have been diluted with the knowledge that I'm inflicting this on myself. It's a different it's a different experience when you are, oh, how do I figure this out? How do I do this? And you're giving it your all. Like you're giving it your all. You know you don't have another option. I feel this way a lot about difficulty in games like Elden Ring, but we can get into that. It's a different experience entirely when you have this knowledge that you're inflicting this on. This is an artificial difficulty. It's not real. You could choose at any moment to just build a flying contraption and head over to the last puzzle. It actually changes the dynamic. It makes it worse.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like especially if the choice is made so easily. Like if there was like if this minecart system, I figured out that the developers wanted me to figure out the minecart system. It was really intuitive and it was really fun. Then I would happily make the choice. But I think in some parts of the game, and I don't just want to go like trashing these specific parts because there's so much like positive to say as well. But I definitely made that experience, and I am glad to hear that this seems to be a more common take. I think that's something a lot of people agree on, which also surprised me because it's like kind of against the normal formula. But I specifically agree in the dungeons. In the shrines, not so much. I think we'll still get like really cool clips of like different ways that we never thought we could solve them. And by the way, one positive thing, which is like a really small thing, where I think the amount of different things you can do to solve something is going to be really cool. Is like kind of like encapsulates that entire philosophy. Was like this dude, this Edison guy, who has like all of the science around, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to like help him keep it up. It's not necessarily like super the most fun gameplay loop, but I think it really encapsulates this philosophy well. Where like most you will basically never find someone who did it the exact same way as you. Like maybe they did like the same building, but they did it in a different order. They used different parts. They positioned it differently, and that I thought is cool.
Yeah,
but I think at the dungeons they could have probably tried to balance it out a little bit more.
See, I love that you have that opinion because it's Nintendo. The people long for the dungeons. They long for restrictions. They long for walls and guidance. Because if I remember correctly, you told me in the last podcast that Breath of the Wild is like your favorite game. It definitely your favorite Zelda game, and there's a limit to how many previous Zelda games that you've even interacted with. So you're definitely the archetype for the, I came in with Breath of the Wild. It's what Zelda is to me. Even you are like, maybe we could have used some more restrictions on these dungeons. Maybe just the dungeon part shouldn't be quite so free.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like especially as someone who likes min-maxing these games, like speedrunning wise, like I like finding the fastest path or whatever, but during my casual experience I still felt like I wanted to do it like right, and I felt like it was easy to do it wrong or feel like doing it wrong. I think that's like the impression I was left with, but thankfully again that wasn't like a huge gripe, because overall I still enjoyed these dungeons and temples a lot more than Divine Beast in Breath of the Wild. Previously my favorite Zelda game was Twilight Princess, and I liked growing up all of these games where they would be like intimidating, cool, giant bosses. Like I liked Shadow of the Colossus, God of War. Mm-hmm. So I got that feeling back, not only from the themes, but I mean, you can probably talk about the temples individually more, but like that was just a straight up upgrade. So
it was better in every conceivable way. Well, let me talk about something related though. So for me, the Sky Islands turned out to be my favorite area. And it was specifically because they seemed uninteresting at first. They're small, they're not large compared to the depths. There's not that much to do there other than shrines and little puzzles. But what I realized was these are very well designed puzzles. So I would go up there, and once I got into the shrine proper, often you would reach like a lower island, and you wouldn't have a way up to the higher island. But the islands would be set up in some way that they'd leave stuff around for you, and you'd figure out how to get up to the next little island. So you get higher and higher until you get to where the shrine is, or you get to where the crystal is that you have to bring to the shrine. whatever the puzzle happens to be. But they leave all these tools there for you, and it's almost always enough to deal with the island. You don't have to, auto build your own thing. You don't have to do that. And so I was like purposely engaging with all of these little puzzles, and I'm like, oh, these are excellently designed. Like these are wonderful. And so I almost like resent auto build. Like I almost resent the ability to make your own hovercraft and make the super efficient vehicle that kind of trivializes a lot of those puzzles and makes those sky islands so good. Because if I just put that out of my mind and I forget that I have it, I thought, oh man, these are excellently designed puzzles. Not that I'm saying that I would like the same restrictions I'm talking about in the dungeons, in the sky islands. I'm not saying that. I just think it's another example of how giving people too much freedom can actually restrict them or prevent them from realizing they could be having a lot of fun working within their limitations.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I feel like that is still the case sometimes, that you can miss out on this stuff. That area from the preview that a lot of people were like showcasing during the preview times of the game. That's like a perfect example. You're supposed to like start out low, take like one of the low gravity platforms, take like this little piston that pushes you over, and then you could also though just take the Skyview tower, open your glider as high as you can, and barely make it to the top one anyway. And then I feel like you would miss out on like puzzling these areas together. But I think. I didn't have that. Thankfully, I didn't have that feeling there that much, because it was at least more apparent. Okay, I probably should start down here. And then sometimes they would, even if you make it to the quote unquote shrine, which isn't really a shrine at that point, early, they would at least put the crystal back down again. So you still have to solve some puzzles. And I also liked that even these most efficient like hovercrafts and bikes, at least they're still pretty bad at bringing these crystals around.
Yeah.
So you usually still have to do some of the stuff that they put there for you. So I really like the Sky Islands too. I did wish that there was like a little bit more. I think the one downside that I hear a lot, or not down, like the one comment that I hear a lot, is that people wish there was at least one bigger one than the tutorial area, in the form of like a village or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I was very happy with them. I was very, very happy with the Sky Archipelagos that would lead you to the temples, especially, I mean, the wind and the water one were like some of my favorite, like,
incredible
gameplay elements. Like the wind one with the music, with all the light motifs changing as you go. You reach like a shrine that has like literally flying ships inside the shrine.
And the tornado, leading up to the air. It's amazing.
That's you brought this up already, which they definitely repurposed the shrines for this a little bit. In general, I love the shrines. I actually haven't done all of them. I'm at like 135 right now. I'm like about to wrap those up. But it seemed like I used to have this habit in Breath of the Wild where sometimes I would feel like exploring the world. So I would like activate the shrines and then move on. But I learned pretty quickly that that's not a good idea in this game, because these shrines will like literally teach you the next mechanics. Like you'll reach the boats in the sky, so there's boats in the shrine, so they teach you how to use those boats. And you'll reach like the sand area, and it'll teach you mirror mechanics of the lights. And I thought that was really well done.
So how did you think, how did you feel about the what's your favorite dungeon out of the four?
Okay, so it's a little bit tricky to answer. I think in overall, for like story arc, the wind area is my favorite. The lead up to it especially. I think the dungeon itself is not like super crazy, right? It's like relatively simple puzzles that you have to do. But like everything else, the boss fight, I mean, I can't even start talking about the boss music for that one in particular, is just carries that so hard that like the whole experience for me will rank at number one. And then and this might get for some people into spoiler territory, so I'm just going to say this again. But despite the Spirit Temple not actually being a dungeon, I have a reason for this. It ranks really highly for me because of the lead up. And I actually made this a point in a video that I made to talk about, because I think this is one that will differ for people a lot depending if they went to the Thunderhead early or not. And why it was so important to me is because, as you know, I got into like a theory crafting for this game a little bit towards like the lead up to the game. And when we first heard about the Zonai or whatever, I would literally go to these areas, like the Zonai ruins in Breath of the Wild. We would like jokingly say like, oh, what if we clip behind the wall here and there would be something there, they were hiding something here. And then like realizing that it like all ties back to the Zonai ruins and there is actually stuff there now. Like areas where we literally try to shield clip into the walls to find something. That was just a really good moment for me. So that's why that ranks highly. Also the music in the Construct Factory, like that was a good experience. But I'd say if you just do the main 4-1, my rating was basically wind, lightning, water, fire.
Wind, lightning, water, fire. Yeah, that's probably close to mine as well. Maybe I would change the water for the lightning, though. I think probably it's wind, water, lightning, fire for me. Well, you know, the thing is, I don't think I like any of the dungeons as dungeons. They're even though I think they're good, you know, I think they're good, and I think they're miles better than the Divine Beasts, like infinitely better than the Divine Beasts. They're still not, you know, classic Zelda. It's still not what I wanted out of them.
And I think we're already getting this conclusion that like that's the one thing we are like basically having something negative about to say because everything else is so good. And I would agree with this. Like I think they are one of the weakest points of the game while still being a massive improvement.
Yeah. So it's actually kind of funny. I genuinely think they're probably the worst part of the game. Apart from atmosphere. But that's what I wanted. Like literally what I wanted out of these places was I realized they are like Divine Beasts. They're just a lot better. They're good Divine Beasts. But I realized ahead of time, you know, it's very likely that what being reasonable in my asking here is, you know, atmosphere and music, like better music, more iconic music that I can recognize, and a nicer atmosphere, a clear aesthetic that differentiates each area. And I got that. And I got that. So I rank these dungeons a lot by atmosphere because like I don't think the puzzles are very interesting. I don't think that the dungeons are very interesting on their own merit. The lead up to the dungeons is more interesting than the dungeon itself.
100% agree.
And the actual atmosphere of just being in the dungeon is incredible. Like for example, the wind dungeon, which so good. So incredible. The whole thing with Tulin, you're flying around. It almost serves like the opening area, serves as a tutorial. Hey, look at Tulin's power. Look how cool it is to use Tulin's thing, and you're going in this tornado, and the ships are flying around. You finally get onto the thing, and the music starts playing. Like the music leading up to it was incredible. The music inside of it was incredible. Then you finally do it, and the music of the boss, Cold Gear, so good. So incredible, like the boss.
And that flute kicks in.
Yes. I love it. The Wind Waker fan in me was like just reeling. And so his boss fight is actually probably my favorite too. Out of the main four, this incredible spectacle boss fight. In Elden Ring, I really like the spectacle boss fights. I like the Raikards. I like Radon. All the stuff that has gimmicks to it. Were cool, and this felt very much like that. It's like, look at how much cool shit is happening, even though it's not, it's not like a 1v1.
Exactly. I 100% agree, and until I beat the game, it was for me as well. We'll probably get into that like a little bit towards the end, which would just make sense. But I like that criteria actually a lot more, because a lot of the dungeons had these flaws. It feels like the Wind Temple itself was too simple. Some of them were trying too hard. But if we just rank the everything surrounding it, I would also agree with your rating of putting water in front of lightning, because I was just like a little disappointed with the interior, and then especially the boss fight wasn't like really hitting for me in the water one. But like the leads up, like moving around on the low gravity, like finding Mipha's court, which in my opinion is probably definitely up there with the prettiest areas in the game.
It's beautiful.
Like that definitely would reach number 2. I think the Wind Temple is still stronger. I was absolutely blown away also by the voice acting for Tulin. Like that actually like really hit hard for me. I think the English one did a good job there.
I gotta look that up.
Yeah. But then I think with that criteria we agree on the dungeon rating.
Yeah, because the Water Temple was genuinely mystifying. Like the music was on point, maybe even better than the Rito dungeon music in the lead up. It's just magical.
Yeah.
The actual dungeon is probably the weakest, actually. Like the actual just like it's what 3 floating stone slabs is
Right, right.
It's literally that's all there is to the dungeon. And like I suppose it would be I didn't do this, but I guess you could just like ultra hand build something right there and just do them all right away.
Probably, yeah.
But no, you have to count the lead up. No, you have to you have to count.
Of course, yeah.
In terms of atmosphere, I think it did excellently, and even the Fire Temple did an okay job with it. I do still think it's the weakest, even in terms of atmosphere. But I really liked the music in the Fire Temple was a callback to Ocarina of Time's Fire Temple music. So that hit that hit home for me.
You got like a jazzy, like the Rook theme at the end. Or like I really like the music. It always made even the weakest points of the dungeons like made me forget about them because the transforming music inside the temples, the lead up, the boss music, the music after when the sages awaken, like just insane.
I did think. Let's see. I did think some of the bosses were not as good as they were all. It's interesting. It's kind of funny. Let me tell you the story. I have a friend who is completely hardcore classic Zelda guy. Like he hates Breath of the Wild. He hates that stuff. But I've gotten him recently to play Breath of the Wild, and sometimes like I can watch him play it. He's playing through emulator, and I can parsec and see his screen. So occasionally like I'll just watch what he's doing. And he got to the part with Master Koga in Breath of the Wild, and he fought this Master Koga. And as you know, Master Koga is probably like the most old classic Zelda boss that there is.
Yeah, because there's like actual like mechanics.
Yeah, like there's these little puzzles that you do for it. I guess they all have like one thing, but Koga's the one that embodies it the most. So he's fighting Koga, and he figures out his little mechanics, and he's like, oh, that was lame, completely lame. And he's used to just complaining about Breath of the Wild, but I was like, hang on, no.
This shouldn't have been lame.
That shouldn't have been lame for you. That's exactly what every single boss in every single Zelda game has ever been. Right there, Master Koga. And you just said it was lame. You don't know what you want. You don't know what you want. You just like to complain at this point. And so getting to these bosses, the Colgera was great. But like a lot of them weren't so great. You know, the Fire Temple one was the worst, I think. The Fire Temple one, they're all trying to, I guess, embrace more that classic Zelda boss mechanics. You know, that you do this thing over and over, you hit it a few times and he dies. That maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
There's the problem again, because I agree with you completely. And for example, the Fire Temple one, I think when I realized in phase 2 what you have to do, he was almost dead. Because you can still hit it with like keys arrows. It will still like home into the eye and do damage. And if you have strong bows, you'll still do damage because they allow you to do that. They give you that freedom. And then when it was almost done, I was like, oh, the arena is round.
Yeah.
You can like use Unabo to shoot him up there. Oh, and I did like for the last hit. And I guess I still got the click, but I definitely agree. If I was to talk about the bosses, it would probably be like Colgera 1, Queen Gibdo 2, and then like Magtarok, and then Goma. Goma looks cool, but like, yeah, it was like kind of, what am I even doing here?
I hate to say this, like, because I hate giving any praise to the Blight Ganons or the Divine Beasts. It wounds me to do it, but the Blight Ganons were just better. The Blight Ganons, like my complaint with the Blight Ganons was not mechanically they were insufficient. It was that they were aesthetically unpleasing to look at. They all look the same. They had the goop. They're all variations on the same monster design. But mechanically, like the Thunderblight Ganon's better than any of these. Like none of these come even close to even the shittiest Blight Ganon. Mechanically, at least.
I agree. But speaking of Thunderblight, it was supposed to be pretty difficult. And to mix it up with something positive, because I'm pretty sure you'll agree with this. The Gleeogs. What do you think about the Gleeogs?
They're amazing. They're incredible.
Yeah.
So good.
Like I remember, because I did like this like crazy spree of like over analyzing all of the preview content, And there was this one frame in one person's preview where I saw, wait, there's like 3 heads that just lit up in the Colosseum. They were yellow. So I already had like an idea. And I actually, in my playthrough, after going to Lookout Landing, I also went through Central Hyrule. I wanted to go back to the Great Plateau. That's where I spent way too much time in Breath of the Wild because of speed running. I wanted to see, I can literally point out every single change here because I know this area so well. And I was like, okay, 5 hearts, maybe let's check out the Colosseum. These mini bosses are usually pretty easy. You like hit their weak spot and then spin. And I got like absolutely obliterated by this Gleeok. I love the theme though, and it made me feel like really epic. It was like flying around, like going higher on the Colosseum, shooting laser beams.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, sick. They actually made like something cool. And I know in the future, once we figured out better, they will still probably become easier, but like for the casual experience, they like really hit the spot, I think.
Yeah, day one experience, your first time doing it. That's what counts, like your first time doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I like about the Gleeoks is that they have mechanics, and it gets incorporated into their fight. So okay, when Fire Gleeok gets low health, he flies super high up, like way out of your range, and he just shows a gigantic blast at you, and just keep doing that over and over. When he does that, you can paraglide into the fire wind, and it'll shoot you really high up, super high up, so you can hit it in the eye, knock it down. Maybe like the fall will probably kill it, or you can finish it off on the ground. When I saw that, it was like so good. But they all have something like that. What's the other one called? Thunder Gleeok in the Colosseum. You ascend up the Colosseum things to get to where it is. He might have another mechanic, but that's how I ascended up the Colosseum grounds to get closer to him, to shoot him in the face. And the last one, like he starts doing icicles down the ground, which I think you can get on top of and recall, so you can get up to where he is and shoot him in the eyes. And when I realized that it's such a better incorporation of like classic, do something to deal with this dragon mechanic and actual difficulty, it's just way better than bosses. Way better.
Yeah, and I think what was really important, what they did for these, which they, like for example in Breath of the Wild they didn't, like the Hinoxes, if you shoot them in the eye, they like go down, you can spin, but they made sure that you can't just do that. Like they have like HP on their eyes, and if you don't get them all quickly together, they will like regenerate, and they definitely made that like a little bit more deep and actually genuinely scary. And I think there's like other examples of this too, like most of the new mini bosses, like now that we like talked about downsides, are so good. Like running into the first frogs or whatever was like genuinely like terrifying. I've had moments where where I was like gliding in the depths, and they started jumping like 200 meters, like almost getting me down. And then they do like this attack where they throw you up and like they vacuum everything like in their mouth. The new mini bosses, every single one that I thought. Let me think what else they added. I haven't even talked about the first time I ran into some of these hands and like my reaction to what happened when you take down the hands. Like I think all of the mini bosses were super, super good.
You know what I like about the hands? Most people, when I saw them talking about the hands, they didn't know what happens when at least early on, they didn't know what happens when you kill the hands because they hadn't killed a hand yet.
Yeah, exactly.
They're hard. Like they're actually hard to deal with. I remember like I was out in the wild and I was like, oh no, I can't deal with this. I'm running away. It's too difficult. They've got gloom stuff. I don't have any gloom resistance or way to deal with it right now. And so I'm running away, and that did not work. Like they're fast.
They're fast, and they grab you from like 10 meters. Yeah.
No, they're as fast as a horse.
Literally, yeah. For me, it was like a similar experience. I ran into one relatively early, but like I said, I went to the Great Plateau pretty early, and it seemed like the enemies on there start off pretty strong. They were like black boss bokoblins and black bokoblins right away, and I was able to take some down and get some like relatively strong weapons. So I ran into one on my way to Rito Village. It's like at a cave where like one of the first towers is, and I was like, okay, these are pretty difficult. Like I guess I could try like throwing some bombs. I was like, oh, nice, that actually worked. I took them down. And then like that other HP bar appeared, and I was like, what? And people, I remember people watching were also like, what? Like, are you like at the final boss? Was like some people's like reaction or whatever. And that was pretty wild. This is actually a pretty good time maybe to talk about combat in general, because what I noticed most during that fight right away is that they definitely, I don't know if you had the same impression, I don't know how much Breath of the Wild you played, but it seemed like they like changed the window for the flurry rushes like around a bit. I don't know if it's like less frames, but it felt like quite different, which I liked personally. I don't know if you made a similar experience.
I've been thinking that it's been less frames forever, but maybe I suck and I'm coping. but you definitely don't suck. So if you also think so,
I think so.
Yeah.
I think they might have just moved them like closer to when you get hit, but you can still flurry rush after the attack actually came out, which just effectively makes it so that it's harder.
Yeah. No, I think that's the case. There'd be places where I flurry rush and I'm just like, I feel like I'm so close. And it effectively did dodge the attack. Like like if I hadn't done the dodge right then, I would have gotten hit.
Right.
But a lot of times I would do the dodge, not get the flurry rush, but still be able to like counter as a result of dodging. It felt a little bit like Dark Souls in that way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like in general, that was like a cool new challenge to overcome. And I do enjoy the combat a lot, but there is also some really powerful weapons in this game.
Oh, it's absolutely broken. It's absolutely
broken.
First of all, like let me talk about some stuff that I noticed. Spears are absolutely overpowered in this game. Like
Spears of the Kingdom. I've been saying Spears of the Kingdom.
They're so
for
strong
this game
because like the problem with spears is that they're weak in Breath of the Wild. They don't do very much damage per hit because they're a percentage of what the other weapons of the same class are. You know, but in this game you fuse something, and the thing you fuse with the weapon gives it a flat damage boost, not a percentage damage, which is flat. So they all increase by the same amount, meaning that the big weapons get less of a increase because their attacks are slower, and the spears get more of an increase because their DPS shoots through the roof because it's a flat increase. And then you get stupid stuff like the Gerudo weapons that does you double damage when you fuse them, or the Zora weapons that gives you double damage every time you decide to get Sidon to give you the water buff. Anytime you get wet. And so it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous damage. The entire I don't know if the silver enemies are as spongy as they were in Breath of the Wild, but it sure didn't feel like it because of how much damage you're outputting.
Yeah, and I mean I like that in general because it allows you. Was one of my wants. Like I feel like you can almost like do like some sort of build where, okay, I'm doing like the desperate strength build right now where I'm on 1 HP, so I do double damage. I'm using royal weapons that incentivize you to use flurry rush, which they also actually, which I only recently learned, you deal double damage with every flurry rush hit with that buff. So currently in the speedruns, we get some of those weapons and Ganon dies with like 2 flurry rushes or something like that. It gets really ridiculous. It's fun to explore, but almost like too broken sometimes in a way. I wonder if they'll ever add like another like difficulty or whatever where they pump in some more HP to the enemies.
I also think they need more to do more damage. One thing I noticed is that even the silver enemies don't do very much damage to you, and so I wanted to not have too much overpowered armor because in Breath of the Wild you upgrade your armor all the way, it trivializes everything. Like I'm like, okay, fine. So I'm just gonna boost it 2 levels on all my set pieces so I can see the set bonus, and that way I'll still have an engaging time in combat. 2 levels is too much. 2 levels is too much.
Yeah.
Nothing does any damage to you. Silver enemies don't do any damage to you with 2 levels. Even Lionels don't do any damage. I'm like, this is sad. Like this is sad.
Yeah, actually I feel like I haven't noticed that too much, but like the silver, like the gloom Lionels or whatever down there, I think I also have a level 2 upgraded armor. I haven't even gotten 2 of the fairies. And I think they do like 5 hearts right now, which I feel like with a health pool of like 35 or like more.
Yeah, our health is huge.
They should do like 15 or something.
Yeah, our health pool is enormous. Like why is it doing that much? So I felt like at all the times, like I remember distinctly in Breath of the Wild, even in normal mode, coming up against enemies that are silver and them doing like 10 hearts of damage, like a silver bokoblin. And like I felt like I was relatively prepared. And I was like, there's something wrong here. They changed something because, and I'm thinking maybe it's the weapons, you know, maybe because a lot of these enemies are wielding weapons that are not fused. The ones that do have fused weapons sometimes do surprising amounts of damage. But but these guys are all wielding like sticks and like base weapons. They don't have access to all the cool stuff that we do.
Yeah.
So like I'm thinking I'm gonna experiment and give them like a super strong Gruta weapon, have them pick it up and see how much damage they do, because maybe it's significant.
Yeah, actually, I agree. And I think I was wanting this to happen, and I know they have this, and I feel like they should do this more, is that these enemies also have like horn attacks, right?
Yes.
And I feel like that would have been a good way to balance it out, because that way it doesn't matter what weapon they wield, but they could take like the base stats of the silver Lionel horn. And I don't know how much damage it actually does specifically if you get hit by specifically that horn attack, but I feel like they should do these attacks more. So if you get hits, then you actually take like a pretty big like hit, because like you said, most of them have like a stick with a stone, or like a stick with a, and of course that's probably even the Lionels have like a claymore with like a spike ball, like the best ones of them, which is probably like 30 damage weapon.
Yeah.
But their horn does like 55, so maybe they should use those attacks more or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure they have damage bonuses. Like in Breath of the Wild, silver enemies, they did more damage, base damage on top of whatever weapon they were wielding. But whatever they're doing, it needs to be more. I'm running around here with level 2 armor, and I'm not that great of a player of Breath of the Wild. I don't get my flurry rushes all the time. My parries are not accurate. I'm getting hit all over the place. If I'm getting hit so much, I should die. Like, how am I supposed to learn? How am I supposed to learn if I don't die on occasion? And I don't think that was a problem early on. Early on, I do remember getting one shot by a lot. I do recall getting one shot all the time early on.
Same actually, yeah. But even by myself a lot. Once I didn't know the range of like the bomb flows, they're like massive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But very quickly, not even maybe quicker than Breath of the Wild. I felt too overpowered.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's time to learn the Any% speedrun.
Okay, what is it?
Because currently the strat is to fight Ganon. Well, I mean, I don't know if I should get into this, because I don't know if this is something you want to figure out what happens if you actually don't do the dungeons and try and beat the game.
Well, I'm gonna be,
but it could be interesting for some people.
Yeah, just go ahead and tell me. I'm gonna be doing this for a while.
Okay. So basically, Any% right now is like a 7-minute unskippable intro, because you cannot skip the cutscene of Ganon at like Awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go through the island, you do this like pretty efficiently, there's already some movement tech. But the crazy part is that the strategy for Ganon right now is to go down to 1 HP and use Desperate Strength, which makes you deal double damage when you're on 1. So you're doing not Ganon only, but every single of the temple bosses shows up there. The army shows up there. The Phantom Ganons from the castle show up there. Then all phases of Ganon happen. And the final fight.
All the bosses show up in succession?
But they all show up. You're alone. You're on 1 HP. They all show up. And to make it worse, we now skip the paraglider. Because it loses too much time. So you do all of this without a glider. It's getting pretty tough.
Yeah. That's actually kind of hilarious. Hang on. So each boss solo, right? Not all at once.
Yep. No sages to like have mechanics or whatever. So it's basically just a raw damage check.
Do you know if the sages, if like let's say you get one sage, does it take that one boss out of the pool?
I think so. Yeah, exactly. That's how it worked with the blights as well in Breath of the Wild. So if you get one, that one is not gonna be there.
That's really interesting. That's cool as hell. I was thinking that while I was going through the final area, because I got all the sages before I did the final area. But I was like, I wonder if they would make me fight all of this in succession before I got to Ganondorf, if I didn't have these fellows here, because that would actually be kind of cool. That would be fairly difficult. I might do that.
Want to try that out? Yeah. It is pretty cool. And if there's no like time pressure, then it might just be fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely something I'll do. And then, of course, they have the same thing in Breath of the Wild. If you were to make it to, like, the last phase of Ganondorf and you die, you start at the beginning, at the army.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So maybe something for people to try once they've beaten the game. I do
What's
eventually
want to... time right now?
Right now, 1:14 currently, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's under 1 hour and 10 minutes today, because we just figured out how to like skip the glider like efficiently, because the hardest part without having the glider is the Colgera fight, as you may be able to imagine.
Right.
Basically, you're just like falling, and you have to do everything in that fall. If you mess up, you're dead, because you can't stop the fall.
Okay. Let's talk about one more thing before we get into like story spoilers.
Right.
Well, actually, have you started speedrunning the game yet, or are you still in your casual playthrough?
Both. I beat the game on like Friday on Friday, and what I'm doing casually now is just like get the 20 more light routes I need and like 20 shrines, and then probably full on speedrunning. But I've learned the run now. Yeah.
Okay. And how is it? How is the speedrunning? How would you say speedrunning is compared to Breath of the Wild so far, or early Breath of the Wild speedruns so far?
Right. Early Breath of the Wild speedruns this one is already infinitely better, because early Breath of the Wild speedruns, yes, had whistle sprinting, but it was basically just running from point A to B. And we still have that a little bit now, but there's already wild stuff, like absolutely wild stuff. I'm not sure if you noticed, there's already glitches where you can like duplicate items with a single shield jump. Like you can shield jump, do some inputs, and you can make 5 diamonds to 10. There's already glitches where like you cancel the auto build thing, right, that builds something, and it'll fly in front of you, but the rune isn't active, so you can like ride your auto builds and like fly around. It's pretty fun. And again, I really like, it was already challenging to do the boss fight in Breath of the Wild, but it's just like really fun to do the bosses at the end, because
The
like this
boss
huge
rush.
adrenaline rush, and there's not anything broken about that now. Just like get good to like get the flurry rushes and like play well, and that's like a nice balance. It's fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the depths. What do you think of the depths?
The depths, yeah. So I was not ready, basically. Again, like I didn't think it was just gonna be. I thought it was just gonna be okay. So there's some caves, bigger caves that you can like one cave for each of the chasms. They're like not connected. They're one area that basically belongs to each of these chasms, and they're like a little bit deeper than the normal caves, and that's it. But that was not the case. I actually, the first time I went down there was once I've maneuvered through the Central Hyrule. I went to the Great Plateau, and the one where the Magnesis Shrine used to be. That was the first one I went down. I actually got super lucky and found like basically that abandoned mine pretty much immediately where you get auto built. But that's when it like kind of dawned on me when I got like the first 2 light routes or whatever. There's like, oh, wait, this is like connected and this is like massive. And then as I got more light routes, I started realizing, okay, so they're like under the shrines. Wait, like the name is the name in reverse. Wait, there's this place here called like Hylia Canyon, and it's under Mount Hylia, and like the lakes are the walls, like everything like fell into place. Like, oh, this is insane.
Yeah. I was down there, and I didn't. Okay, so it's basically, I may have spoken about this in our podcast, but I don't remember. It's exactly what I wanted. Like, it's exactly what I wanted. I often talk about, I wanted it to be the Elden Ring moment where you are in the elevator, you go down, there are stars, you realize there's this giant, you have no idea how large, it's giant interconnected underground area. And it's like that times 20, because it's not just a little strip of underground interconnected area that connects 2 different overworld locations. It is the entire underground area that connects the entire map. It's the map doubles in size. And so when I was playing it, I loved it, but it didn't wrap my head around it until I was streaming it, and somebody on stream was like, "Hey, go to the map and zoom out," or something.
Yeah.
And so I zoom out, and I'm looking at it, and I had the regional phenomena quest on, and you could see where all the different towns are with those markers. And so I could see all 3 of the markers underground, and I was like, oh, it's the size of Hyrule. It's mind-blowing.
Literally just the whole map. And I feel like yes, after getting through it, and like, but I got exactly what you were saying, because for me, this Elden Ring moment, I was happy to realize that you had that same experience with that specific elevator, and a lot of people did. But like when I was playing it at first, I felt so strongly about that specific elevator, and then the lead up to actually reaching the actual area. I remember like stopping there and telling everyone like, what is this real? Because I was playing it like a little bit later than the other people. And I got that same experience at first, and I'm still like, again, you probably saw it. I was just like now still exploring the depths, getting the last light routes, and you still find something new, and it's still so good at making you feel like you're discovering things and you're exploring. Of course, it's not. I think for me, my favorite area ended up being just the surface, which was surprising to me as well, because that's like the one thing that we knew, right, compared to Breath of the Wild. But I just really appreciated all the changes to it and how different it was and how easily it was to get sidetracked. But the depths as a whole were like the best surprise.
Do you have any complaints? Like, do you have anything that sticks out to you as a complaint so far, other than what we've talked about, maybe a little in the disappointment of the dungeons?
There's one complaint that I bring up, which is like a super niche complaint that most people, and especially people new to the series, will not share with me, which is that I feel like and it's good that they did this, like they have a lot of these like combat training shrines. I absolutely love the new test of strengths where they like strip you of your equipment and your like your food. That's amazing, so much better. But like the ones that just like teach you one mechanic, like here's how you bullet time, here's how you sneak strike, for somebody
Here's
like
me
specifically. Yeah, here's how you throw. For someone like me specifically, it was like underwhelming to reach a shrine and be like, okay, what's the puzzle? And then like be like, oh, so this is how you use bullet time, which you've already done for 5,000 hours. That's a super niche complaint. Like, I think this is good that this exists for people, but I think there's probably like 15 or so of these like training, maybe 10 of these training shrines that they were like a little bit disappointing. But overall, shrines upgrade, like everything is just upgraded. I think there is no singular point to say that Breath of the Wild is better than this game, other than that wasn't needed for Tears of the Kingdom to exist.
Oh, that's an interesting topic.
Yeah, because I personally believe, after going through this world and realizing how much there was, I don't think it's possible to make a game like this without having the blueprint like they did
With Breath of the Wild. Yeah,
for anyone. Yeah.
If I was going to say one thing that Breath of the Wild did better, I think Breath of the Wild captured a lonesome feeling better. And maybe that's not what they were going for in Tears of the Kingdom, because they definitely didn't do that in Tears of the Kingdom. I guess this was also a criticism of Breath of the Wild for some people, that it felt like the game was too empty. There weren't enough NPCs. Everything felt off. Like the environments were beautiful, but everything was pretty much devoid of NPCs, apart from the occasional traveler that you see. And there's supposed to be this calamity going on, and monsters roam the area, but people like are living.
Didn't really care.
Yeah, they're living in a very casual way. They don't have walls in their villages. They don't. There's no monster extermination squads, like there is here. Whereas in here, it's a lot more serious. There are monster elimination squads. They're like, we have to keep doing this, like to stem this tide of monsters that keep coming out. That people have built fortifications over there in Lookout Point. Every location is severely impacted. It's not like the Divine Beast there. It's like, something's going on. It might be a problem later. It's fine. No, like, sludge is all over Zora's domain. Like, Gerudo Town is absolutely empty. Gibdos roam the streets. The sand desert makes travel impossible. The Rito are starving. And you see this, like, but way before you get to the villages. Like, people talk about it way before you get to the villages. You're at the stables. The people are talking about how the Rito are getting no shipments, no food. They're not meant for this extreme cold weather. So that was great. I
know what you mean about the feeling of like lonesomeness. And I think they will still both have their strengths, like that feeling of like arriving there in this dead world almost, which I think is like a good way to put it. In Breath of the Wild is like something pretty special. But yeah, again, I think that's obviously not what they were going for. And this time, this is like basically the power of friendship, the game.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk about the story, so it makes sense. I did, while you were bringing this up, I did wish I was alone a little bit more, because that's actually my other complaint, and I guess it ties back to the dungeons. I literally only use Tulin. I disable every other sage.
I was about to say that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know. That's another small complaint. Again, I want to make sure that I think we are both like completely blown away. We love this game, but it's still interesting to talk about the few flaws in it. Um, but for me, why could you not tool and auto activates, right? Like why not when you block and you press another button, you get Sidon's power, and if you like aim your bow and press another button, you get Reju's power, and
Yeah.
like. And then you know, but the only one that auto activates in the worst moment. I don't want him
worst.
to like hover around on my like vehicle while I like fly around or something.
Completely just I hate Yunobo. Like I thought I might like Yunobo more in this game. He was kind of annoying in the last game. A lot of people don't like him, but him being on my vehicles all the time, his power is kind of okay, useful. But I don't want you on my vehicle. Like leave me,
exactly.
let me enjoy the gorgeous scenery. And I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to go shoot some snow. Leave me be.
Yeah. I think pretty much everyone is in agreement there at least. So
I actually probably dislike them more than you do because my complaints are like, and it's so hard to activate them. It's so hard to activate them. If you want to have all of them out at the same time, it's ridiculous. The screen is just full of people, just cluttering up my journey. And let's say I want to get, so I like Sidon's power because I like using Zora weaponry, and Zora weaponry doubles in strength if you're wet. And Sidon's ability gets you wet, and it lasts for like 30 seconds, where the splash fruit lasts for like 10.
Right.
So it's a great ability, but I have to chase it. He's constantly running away from me. He constantly runs away from me, trying to prevent me from getting my double damage. It's so infuriating. He's becoming my least favorite character. It's making me dislike the character because of how his little avatar behaves.
No, and I feel like they already had that. Like the Rook's protection was like a similar concept where if you shielded, it just appeared.
That was so much more elegant.
Okay, you shield and you press attack once, and then the aura is active. Like even that would have been better.
Yeah.
Instead of like walking up to him and talk to him. But yeah,
Rivali's Gale was conditional. Urbosa's Fury was conditional based on what you're doing. You know,
exactly.
The previous champion abilities were so much more elegant to implement. Now I have to actually walk towards them. Why?
Yeah.
Hold down the down button, you know, and that puts up a little wheel, a radio wheel, and then you use the right analog stick to select one of the 4 powers that you want to use. There you go. Do that.
100% agree. Right. But we went over the comparison, and I already hinted towards like the power of friendship. The last time we talked like a lot about like story predictions and stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We got a lot right.
We did. I was going to say a lot we did and a lot we didn't like think about at all. But I had some people come to me either in regards to, I mean, I had to laugh about the thumbnail that you chose for it because it ended up being much more accurate. Like just like the keyword of dragons, I feel like nobody expected him to be that important, even not me.
Yeah.
But it definitely was. So and yeah, I got some people, especially about the like Ganondorf steals the tea and the gloom and whatever.
Yeah.
But
we basically came up with that during the podcast. Like we were speculating and talking about it, and we I don't think either one of us had that idea before we started talking about it. And then we talked about it. It's like maybe he takes the tear. That's Zelda comes by, grabs. Well, I think it was a different tear that she grabs. I don't remember anymore. Then she goes back in time and she waits there somehow, and then so she, Ganondorf kills Sonya, takes her tear. All that was correct. It turned out it wasn't not Rauru that was the dragon, but literally everyone except Rauru, like almost everybody.
Right. That's very funny, especially because I remember like playing like the intro and people were like, I don't know if they were like alluding to something. It didn't dawn on me. Then I was like, oh yeah, look, there's like Rauru flying around. Because I thought that the dragon flying around the plateau was like Rauru in the dragon form. It made sense to me still because he was like, there's a spirit, so I guess this is like his form or whatever, guarding the Sky Island here.
Yeah.
Then it did end up being correct that the sky barrier, which was essentially hiding all of this, was actually after the plateau, then like dispelled by that dragon, which I then thought was Rauru. And that all made sense. But maybe let's do like an overall recap, because so what I believe happens is basically they go down there, right? Which, and this is here I'm complaining again about my favorite game. I guess randomly, unless you figured this out, at the exact time they enter the room, the seal breaks. I don't know if this was just lucky timing because it wasn't explained to me at any point. Maybe you have a better theory for this. And then I believe, Zelda takes basically Raru's tear back in time. And this is also something we talked about, which ended up being right, is they're not like presets. They're like secret stones, kind of like prisms that amplify a person's power. So the second Zelda touches Raru's tear of light, it turns into a recall tear because she has like the power of like time. He's like the sage of time or whatever. She falls back in time using it. And then like we learn about the rest of what happens back in time there through the geoglyphs or like new memories or whatever.
I want to mention something. It was by the time the game came out, everybody accepted the Zelda is back in time theory. Okay, everybody accepted the Zelda's back in time theory. But I want to point out, I think I'm the first one that made a video about that. I'm almost positive that I'm the first one that made a video about that. And when I made my video, people thought I was crazy. Like for exactly like 32 hours before it became obvious that I was right. So I just want to make sure everybody all eat your words.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are still like holding on to it. So like, no, it's like a parallel universe. Like time travel makes things confusing. And I will admit that there is some things that I dislike the way that they did it, because it does make things confusing. And I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of how the story works.
Okay, then you should tell me in a minute. But keep going.
Right. There's like some things that I feel like didn't or bothered me a little bit, which is mainly the continuity to like Breath of the Wild. Like the story in itself like unfolded and it made sense. Like the mural when they first gone there was uncovered, so this always happened. Zelda was always up there as a dragon bathing like the Master Sword inside her or whatever. So technically, I guess during Breath of the Wild there were 2 Master Swords and 2 Zeldas, and that's maybe still acceptable. But I still, to this point, haven't really learned what happened to the Divine Beasts and Towers, and people have just forgotten about Link. Some people like remember, others don't really.
We need to talk about that.
Yeah,
we need to talk about that. Okay, so Link's house. All right,
right. I went there.
Yeah, Zelda lives there now. Do you think they're living together?
I've read some stuff, and I don't know. This might have just been like a tweet where somebody said it was confirmed they do. I don't know what they count as confirmation. I don't know if there's actually confirmation in the game somewhere hidden that they do.
The voice actress
said they're in a relationship or something, right?
Yeah, the voice actor said they're in a relationship, and that confirms nothing. It doesn't confirm anything.
No. And don't get me wrong. I like that idea in general. I think they belong together or whatever. I'm not like a shipper or whatever, but it makes sense to me. I'm not one to be like, no, they shouldn't live together there. I thought it was like a really cute moment, regardless whether they live there or not. Like reading like the story, and she's made like an outfit, and stuff like that. That made sense. But then, and this is actually ties into this, she built a school, right? And you go to that school and you do like this quest, and they teach about the calamity. One of the few times that they actually talk about the events on Breath of the Wild.
Yep.
And like Link is sitting in on this lesson. The guy that saved everyone, and the teacher's just like, oh yeah, there was this hero. He like saved the world.
Doesn't even mention
be like
you.
That hero.
Doesn't mention.
And
you.
He doesn't even be like, oh, by the way, that's that guy.
This guy.
That's
him
exactly.
Right here.
And that bothered me a little bit. Yeah.
There's tons of important NPCs that don't remember who Link is. The NPC that you know should canonically have talked to him. Just completely don't know what it is. And this is what makes me. This is why I brought up the house. Bolson doesn't know who you are. Bolson, the guy that built your house in Breath of the Wild, doesn't know who you are.
That's the guy that's on Lurlin, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't remember you at all. You never paid for that house. That canonically never happened. That was never your house. All that stuff that you did in Breath of the Wild to make that house never happened. You don't.
And here,
go ahead.
Here's a funny detail. Like, you literally cannot, like, it doesn't work. You cannot start the Terrytown quest unless you build that house, but Hudson remembers you.
So you did do
So you did canonically do the Terrytown quest, but that's literally only possible in Breath of the Wild if you buy the house from Bolson.
Right.
And these continuity issues, I don't know, maybe some of them are like translation based as well. I'm not sure about that.
Right.
That's probably something that we'll have to find out, but I don't think so. I think there's a lot of instances where that seems like a little strange.
So, like, the reason that you would think that both you and Zelda live there is because it's your house, but it was
Right.
never your house in this canon, in this continuity.
Exactly.
So that piece of evidence just gone out the window. The fact that it was your house is not a fact at all. So it's not a house. It's not a fact pointing in the direction that they live together. I think that there's evidence that she's just living there by herself and Link lives elsewhere. Or outside. Maybe he doesn't have a house. He likes it outdoors. He's the Breath of the Wild hero. Maybe
he doesn't sleep.
Yeah. Okay, but there is also evidence that you do live there. And the only thing that I would say is evidence that you do live there is the fact, and that you're a couple, is the fact that all of your stuff is gone. Like
oh yeah, exactly.
Like all of your weapons, all your weapon places, all the things that you bought for your house are gone. And I'm like, what would be more natural than for her to throw out all the stuff?
That is true. That's actually true. Yeah. No, but like that aside, maybe it's almost better for this game to like not assume or like not think about Breath of the Wild too much other than those small interactions and kind of let it like stand for its own. Let me ask you this. I think we kind of tried, and we both kind of agreed on this as well. During the podcast, I came like more into that conclusion as well, that I believed that this entire universe is kind of like a reborn, rebooted Hyrule.
Yeah.
Right? Because when it was like just before the game came out, the developers officially used like the word imprisoning war, and people were like, oh my god, it just got a timeline placement. This actually plays after Ocarina of Time. Oof. And I mean, I definitely do not think so. I think the way before the game I came out, the way I phrased it after reflecting with you and with other people was like, they are going to take Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and retell the events of the series in this universe. It's like a Hyrule that's doomed to the same fate. It has a Ganondorf, like an evil guy. It has the embodiment of dark. It has Zelda, like the princess embodiment of light. And there's sages again, and it's a fight of good and evil, but in their own universe. I don't know if it seemed like you also agree with that.
At the time, I understood what you were saying, but I was hesitant to accept that. And I kind of wanted and I didn't believe you. Like, so I got where you were coming from, but I thought you were full of shit. It's like, this is full of shit. There's no way. No, I think you were right. No, I think you were right. I looking at the trailers, I absolutely think that's what ended up happening. I was like, oh my god, Limcube. At least you were the most right. Like Limcube had it. Like he had the idea that this is some kind of parallel universe or a reboot of the series or a reiteration of past concepts brought into the fold. I'm pretty sure you were the most correct. I don't think this fits in the timeline at all. Okay. So here's why I say that. Ganondorf's not supposed to exist at the founding of Hyrule. He exists in Ocarina of Time. He's a normal human. He gets born in Ocarina of Time. He is just a dude. There's only one instance where Ganondorf. Okay, in almost every situation that there's a Ganondorf, he in the previous timeline, he just dies when he dies and doesn't get. It's not a different person. So, Wind Waker, he dies, he's dead. It's over. Twilight Princess, he kind of dies and is dead. It's over. That's like, that Ganondorf's gone. In the Fallen Hero timeline, he dies, but the same guy tried to get revived by his minions. And that's what's going on. So in the Fallen Hero timeline, he dies, he's dead, he stays dead. The minions try and revive him. So, but it's still the same one. It's not a different one that's born later, called the same thing. And this guy, this Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom, is his own man. He's never met Link. He's never met Zelda. He's not the Ganondorf from Ocarina of Time. The only other situation where this happened, what people point out, like, is Four Swords Adventure. And apparently this is also a Ganondorf that is not related to the other Ganondorf, but I truly think this is just an oversight. If they ever make a new Hyrule Historia, they'll change its position to somewhere else where it makes more sense. It's just dumb.
In fact, and I'm going to say something that will a lot of people won't like, but I think this game, if anything, even before I thought this, but this game, if anything, and reflecting more on the story of this game and previous games, made me realize that a timeline in general is basically unnecessary. Because The Legend of Zelda is, at its core, a story about good and evil and light and dark. And I feel like this game encapsulated that perfectly. Like that's what it's about. There's a good and there's an evil. And I think the people like the idea of like a timeline because it's like, oh, so it started with Skyward Sword and the mice cursed them for this to happen. But I talked a lot with Rin Kuto, who's like incredibly smart and like super into like all of this theory stuff and Japanese culture. And he kind of made me understand that this curse, it's not really a curse. Like the mice is essentially just like spitting facts. When he says like, wherever you go, a version of me will haunt you, like I will reincarnate or whatever. And yes, this can be understood this way, but essentially what he means is like, if there's good, there's dark. Like if there's light, there's dark. If there's good, there's evil. This is just the truth of the world. And I think this game, the logo, the ending, was like a perfect encapsulation of this again. Like, I don't think these games technically need to belong together. It just like tells the same story in different ways with different means. No,
I agree.
That's why I think they don't necessarily need to like interconnect.
I don't know if they. So here's an issue I've always had with Demise. Demise was entirely unnecessary. Because like you said, the theming of the story is about this eternal struggle between a hero that rises up to meet the challenges of malice and evil that rises age after age after age. And so the hero, the hero is born. He goes and by the hero is like the hero from the hero's journey. Like the hero, Link is literally the hero with 1,000 faces. From Joseph Campbell's work. He's a perfect hero. It's literally what he is. Yeah. His stories often are perfect hero's journey stories. So I agree with you. It's completely thematic. The problem with Demise was they didn't need to make it so explicit. Like Skyward, I've always thought Skyward Sword made it a mistake because we already had Demise. Like Ganondorf was already Demise. Like
basically, he was that role. Yeah.
There is no difference between what the story was before Skyward Sword and what it was after Skyward Sword. What you had was there's this guy, there's this force that incarnates into a man, into the form of a man, an ambitious evil man that wants to rule and conquer, and does evil things to do that. And a hero rises to meet him, and they've got the hero and the princess. All of that already existed long before. Demise existed in Fujibayashi's head. We already had this kind of cycle. Fujibayashi codified it. That's a mistake. You shouldn't codify it. It's like why Cthulhu monsters suck once you know what they are. Like Cthulhu monsters are only interesting when you don't really understand them, when they're nebulous, when they're not codified. This is why Dark Souls and Elden Ring stories are often so good. It's before you really understand what any of that stuff is. What were you going to say?
Yeah, and I think you're the one spitting the facts now because what you just said made me realize, and I think maybe that's exactly what they did, because there is actually no explanation in this game why Ganondorf, as the Demon King, as the Demon Lord, is so similar to the mice, because that's the same thing. There's basically just the embodiment of darkness. The mice never needed to exist, and maybe that's what they're kind of trying to hint at here. This is just the evil. This is the dark. This is the bad guy. They at least, and maybe there is a reason that's explained in the game why it's like so uncannily resemblant of the statue of like the mice, like the hair and like the scaly nature of him being like in the Demon King form. Mm-hmm. Some people might go as far as like, oh yeah, this is like the mice showing that like the mice is like it's a reincarnation of him, but it doesn't even matter. Like you said, like
it doesn't matter.
They don't need to exist. There needs to be a dark and a light and dark, and then the hero that pushes the light to win or whatever, which in this case is like Link. But that's what I thought was like I literally had it was so beautiful when I saw exactly my belief about the series so perfectly encapsulated in the ending of the game, because this was like the light dragon and the dark dragon, like yin yang intertwined in this eternal fight. Both of them decided, and this is like such a cool symbolism, they decided to eat the tears to become eternal, because they're literally the embodiment. They're inevitable. They both will like exist, and then Link is the one that pushes the light to win at the end or whatever. But like the symbolism was just so beautiful. And then like, I mean, it's obviously underlined with like insane music, really good visuals, and like just man.
I also want
that was so
to I want to mention to people like this is also like an order and chaos thing. It's always been an order and chaos thing, like the yin yang symbolism, the fact that dragons are chasing each other, the decision to become mortal. Zelda represents. There's a reason why she's a princess. There's a reason why she's a princess. She's represents the kingdom. Like she represents the order, the order that rules and makes things good for people. Like, so there's a good order, and then Ganondorf is a destroyer. He wants to usurp. He wants to control. He chases after. It's an order and chaos thing. It's not just she represents good authority, good kingdom, and Ganondorf is representative of trying to destroy that and the chaos that comes from war and destruction and the desire for conquest. Let's talk about the ending in a moment. I want to talk a little bit more about why this doesn't fit in the timeline. This doesn't fit in the timeline.
Yeah.
And also, okay, so you get that scene where Rauru is the first king of Hyrule. He establishes Hyrule. Right. Sonia is the first queen of Hyrule. He's a Zonai. They come from the heavens. They're the descendant of the gods, something like that. Ganondorf kneels, and it's a perfect parallel for the Ocarina of Time scene, where Ganondorf is kneeling before the king, plotting treachery. He's plotting. Yeah. It's exactly the same thing. Now, here's an interesting detail that someone on Twitter came up with. Kotake and Koume were I think that's their names, were the witches, Gerudo witches that raised Ganondorf. They're like his mothers.
Yep.
And his weapons have their names inscribed.
Says that, yeah, I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's those two Gerudo women that are next to him in the hall, in the Great Hall. So those are supposed to be Kotake and Koume. I think you see them in one other scene with the Moldugas. So one thing people have said, the timeline is cyclical in nature. Maybe the Kingdom of Hyrule was destroyed by Ganondorf at some point. And then so much time passed and then Rauru reestablished the Kingdom of Hyrule. Just completely reestablished it, and then a Ganondorf was born into it. And a lot of people have said that in my comment sections. And then the Kingdom of Hyrule,
that's a cope.
And it's such a cope. And so Ganondorf was born, and he's called Ganondorf, and the kingdom's called Hyrule. And Kotake and Koume were also born and called Kotake and Koume and were followers of Ganondorf. And nobody remembers the old Ganondorf. Nobody remembers any of that stuff, even though some of these people could have been alive at the time.
Yeah.
No.
There's so much evidence. Like the Triforce is like merely a reference anymore, which was so important. Like the concept still exists, but it's not like a physical thing. Essentially, if you want to take it that far, you could refer to the depths as like low rule, which also is like already abandoned at this point. Like it's just a fusion of these concepts, like a retelling in my mind. But
the Sky Islands are there. The scene with Ganondorf betraying the kingdom is there. It's literally a retelling. It's what this is. It's a retelling of all of them. It's not just a retelling of it's a retelling of all of them. It seems to me.
Wait, there's the perfect point, because the Sky Islands are actually not there during that scene, but they should be, because Skyward Sword played before Ocarina of Time, right? But they were only sent after these events of when Ganondorf kneels, right? Because all of the stuff like Jump of Time in the cutscenes is like on the ground, so that doesn't fit either. Like it just I think you can't really make it work.
So this idea that like a whole bunch of time and the Zelda series is cyclical in nature, but it's like, yeah, but not like that, bro. Like why? Right. I just okay. So there was an interview with Eiji Aonuma, and he was asked where it fits in the timeline recently, and he's like, I'm just gonna let fans figure it out. And I wish he had done that to begin with, because it never needed to be any different. It never needed to be any different. So I actually don't just think it's a reboot of the series. I agree with everything I've said up to this point. I think it's a reboot of the series. However, after a little more time thinking about it, I now also think everything is canon, also, and it is part of the timeline. And here's how I explain it. So, in several scenes in Breath of the Wild, Fi talks to Zelda. Fi, the spirit of the Master Sword. You hear her little sound. She talks to Zelda. So Fi's there. In Tears of the Kingdom, several times Fi talks to Zelda, tells her things. I think at least one time when they meet together, and the Master Sword tells her to heal her so that she can get back to Link in the future. I think that Eiji Aonuma, at the bottom of his heart, does not care about the timeline and doesn't like I said this before. He cares that the games are connected. Like he cares that there's a history there. Like the Master Sword's design is the same. It's not a complete retelling of everything. Fi's sword sound is there. There's a lot of references. They talk about in Breath of the Wild spirit and stuff. And so people came up with the convergence theory to say, hey, that's kind of like a soft reboot, and also a way to connect everything to Breath of the Wild, keep a hold of their history, and also not care about it too much. And so that's what I thought before. This is like a step further in that direction, it seems to me. So you still get Fi's sword sound. All the stuff in Breath of the Wild still happened, or at least most of it in Breath of the Wild still happened. I just deeply think that he wants to reference the old games and doesn't care where it fits in the timeline or if it fits at all.
No, exactly. And that's why I feel like they're merely just a myth in these games. He wants to reference them because these stories still are valid. They still count because they're still the same idea, right? Of a hero rising up in the struggle of light versus dark or whatever. Like, of course, he doesn't want to make it like want to not have them count. Like, I don't think, for example, the sound that Fi makes in Breath of the Wild is ever necessarily referenced as Fi. It could be, but I feel like it's more like, yeah, there's a voice in the Master Sword because this is something that happens in this world. You know what I mean? Like, I think they are all canon in a way because they're all their own version of this struggle and this story.
We agree. Like the only reason I was ever not on this team is because Nintendo was the one that, like, an idea that I keep trying to debunk is that the fans came up with the timeline and that Nintendo never ever cared about it. But that's not how it happened back in the day. Every single game they've ever made, they connected to the previous one. Like everything, they themselves, nobody needed to help them. And they've changed some things around based on maybe fan pushback because it didn't make sense. But they themselves have always wanted every game to fit with every other one.
Right.
It doesn't seem that's the case anymore. It doesn't seem like that's the case anymore. I truly think, well, just think of it this way. Isn't it a more elegant solution that this is just a new continuity? Like that this is just a new timeline that's just kind of referencing all the old stuff, and it's a
100% agree.
Because to bring yourself in these little circles, trying to make, oh, Hyrule, so much time has passed and everything was reborn and Hyrule came back and it's called Hyrule and nobody remembers anything in the past. Like, why? Like, isn't that literally, didn't you just describe a reboot? Like, do you not, the words coming out of your mouth, did they not just describe a reboot anyway? What's the functional difference between what you're saying and what I'm saying?
No. I mean, I 100%, I completely agree with that. And, I think I know you talked about this with Monster Maze, like they are rectifying things clearly. I was gonna hint towards like the 7/8 like heroine like part of the game or whatever. And at one point they were like, yeah, Skyward Sword is where it started or whatever. And at one point they probably had this idea with the 8th heroine, but like, oh nah, we don't want to be bound by some maybe mere hint that we put in the game. So now we have to make like 7 heroines and an 8th one. So we just say like, oh yeah, this is another universe where there's like Tingle or whatever and his 7 heroines that also save the world from dark. So like, yeah, I think they made a point to connect them, and now they said like, yeah, okay, we'll stick with the concepts and we retell it once again.
Yeah, I truly,
because do you think like Ganondorf will never show up again? I don't think so. After they just sold like 15 million copies.
No, Ganondorf's coming back. He sells. Ganondorf sells.
Ganondorf sells.
It's also the darn it, I lost what I was going to say. Hang on, I thought it was interesting. What did you say right before Ganondorf?
The statues, the 7 heroine statues, and like Tingle and his own universe, and them rectifying things.
Yes, rectifying things. What did they fix? Now I've lost it. Maybe I'll come up with it later.
Okay.
But no, I'm glad we agree, and you totally called it. So good job. Like you totally had it from the beginning. More than any other person, you got it right. Parallel universe, thematically the same but different.
Right.
Where's the Sheikah technology? Where's the
Yeah,
Sheikah
yeah.
technology, Limcube?
That's another one, because like I remember we were trying to piece it together, be like, okay, so the Sheikah, like their stuff came from underground, and there's like holes now where the shrines used to be.
Yeah.
Maybe they were like, okay, let's just put the holes there so we can like, maybe people can like imagine they just got destroyed, and that's that. But then there's like one guardian left on top of the Hateno tech lab, so they did exist, but like is there like a hidden
For a moment,
construction site where they're all like being repurposed? No, I don't think so either. And then they exist clearly in the towers, and like
for a moment, because of Balson not remembering you, and because a lot of people that should remember you don't remember you, and because you can't do the Terrytown quest without doing Balson's quest, stuff like that, just constantly happening. I don't remember all the instances, but it happened a lot in the game. Because of that, I was like, what if they're even not connected to Breath of the Wild? Like, what if it even...
No. I had that too. I was like, so did the timeline get like altered by Zelda happening? But
yeah.
Of course, at the end it was like, okay, no, it always happened. But like, there were so many moments where I was like, why does this guy not remember me? Did the calamity never happen? And then people were like teaching about it again. There was definitely some continuity issues.
What I was thinking is like, maybe Zelda going for a moment. I don't know if I don't think this is true, but for a moment I was like, maybe Zelda going into the past messed with the timeline in subtle ways, and that's why a lot of the things that we remember happening never happened, and Link doesn't remember them happening either because it never happened to him, and this is a slight alteration in the timeline that's not terribly important. Maybe that's why a lot of these inconsistencies are happening. But the Sheikah tech, like I've seen comments and people talking about the Sheikah tech. Oh, it's like, oh well, you know, the Pura collected it all. Like they spent 6 years or however long the time skip was, like getting every piece of technology and repurposing it. And I'm like, repurposing it for what? Repurposing it.
Right.
Where is it? Where is it?
Exactly.
What do you mean?
Like, there's no way they made like 600 guardians and even these giant pillars around Hyrule Castle, the towers and the vine beasts, into like one pair of arms for every tower.
Yeah.
That would have been pretty inefficient.
It's ridiculous. Where's the giant's pit? Where's the scrap pit where all of this would be?
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. And so some people would be like, you know, at the end of Breath of the Wild, it says that Vah Ruta stops working or something. And it's like, maybe the Sheikah tech, after its purpose is done, just shut down and stops working. That's fine. That's fine. I'm totally okay with that. That seems reasonable. It's a fine theory. Where is it?
Even if they're exactly, but like even if it was something ridiculous, like all of the divine beasts dug themselves under the ground again, the tower went underground. Like, at least say that. I feel like. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so in a lot of the places where the shrines used to be, there's now gloom holes, like in several locations. There's gloom holes in places, especially in the Great Plateau, it's very clear. There are gloom holes where the shrines used to be at. Okay. I could see the gloom targeting Sheikah technology specifically. You know, the upheaval happens, gloom comes out, because the gloom apparently targets weapons specifically. It's got enough intelligence to target weapons, maybe so that, you know, they can't resist. So they can't resist when Ganondorf takes over and sends out his armies. So I could easily see that being the case with the Sheikah technology, and maybe it corrodes it really quickly and it decays into nothingness. All the Sheikah technologies returns to the earth, gets like the greatest. We really should have a Ganondorf in our own universe to save the planet.
Right.
But even if that's the case, why is no one mentioning? Why is no one saying anything? Like, even if it's any of these explanations, it would not have taken two sentences, you know, in the game to explain what happened to the Sheikah technology. And therefore, a lot of the speculations we're just doing just seem ridiculous. Because even if you take the Sheikah technology from a lot of these different places, you assume it shuts down, you assume Pura and the others like are stripping it away. Maybe even assume maybe they decided, hey, the Sheikah technology is dangerous because Ganondorf took it away, you took control of the Divine Beast. We should dismantle and destroy everything. When you go to the Shrine of Resurrection, and you think about how big the shrines are themselves, you know, so the Shrine of Resurrection is just gone. Like, it's all gone. It's still called the Shrine of Resurrection. The Sheikah tech is stripped from the walls. It's not it's not just gone. Like, they didn't just take the bath and the lights. They stripped the walls away. And then when you think about the interior of the shrines, they're enormous. It would take not 30 years to get rid of all this Sheikah technology, not 6.
Yeah. And I hope we get some word on this from the development team, because maybe this is a cope take, and you kind of said this already, but maybe that is also exactly something they did intentionally to be like,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be, because we are just telling this story of like light and dark. Like these things don't have to have happened. This is just this story again, you know? Like this continuity doesn't, it will exist in some places for like fan service or whatever, but it doesn't really matter if
I
the
remember what I was
Sheikah
going to say.
just like,
I remember what I was going to
Uh-huh.
say. One of the things I think they corrected is apart from demise, he didn't need to exist. He actually made him less interesting. But another thing is the timeline itself. I think by Aonuma saying, "I'm not telling you where it fits in the timeline. Like, think of it yourself." He's correcting an age-long mistake that he made with the Hyrule Historia. The
Right.
yeah, the fact that the Hyrule Historia, like the fact that it's a soft read book, like just fixes a lot for me. Like fixes a lot for me. I'm happy that they decided you don't need to explicitly know where everything fits together, because I don't think even we know. Like, I don't even think Anuma knows or cares where everything explicitly fits together. It just kind of does, and you got to accept it.
And that's what we did here, because even we have these issues, and maybe they'll reference them. It doesn't at the end of the day really matter that much, because it still like works. Like,
Yeah.
it would be cool to maybe get some insight or get some explanations on it, and I feel like they try that in some.
In this one,
points,
it's a little
but like
different though, because this is
like directly connected. I see that. Yeah,
it's a 6-year gap. Like, it's directly connected. It's Pura. It's everyone's the same person. Like, it's not the same as starting off a new game entirely. And like, if they came out with a new game entirely and they did the same thing, they didn't explain anything, and didn't connect it to Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, that's fine. But this is an explicit sequel directly connected to it. In a small 6-year gap between them. Like, I would like something like within the context. This isn't even in the context of the greater themes. This doesn't affect the greater themes. Just tell me why the fuck the Sheikah technology's gone.
Yeah. And I think this is one of them, but I think there's 3 big questions that I would love to either have explored in like some Creating a Champion book, maybe DLC or something. This is one of them, the continuity. What happened to the tech? What happened to the people? Is this just them telling us it doesn't have to necessarily fit or whatever? That's number 1. Number 2, to me is super interesting, is the other 3 dragons and their potential like origins. There's these like armor sets in the game that talk about like that are essentially referencing the other dragons. We kind of got some insight of how a dragon could even be created in the first place. In original storytelling, like Din and Nehru or whatever, were like the original gods. Were these the people like that were even older than Rauru and like Minoru, and they also draconified, and that's how it became known as the Forbidden Rites? Are we going to learn more about those? That was number 2. And then number 3 is, how does Zelda exist? Because her blood connection and her great grandma like dies, but I don't think we saw like a kid between Rauru and her.
There must have been a kid. There must have been a kid.
I guess that's all. That's what we can say, right? Like, there technically, literally, must have been a kid we never met, like an undercover one who ended up eventually being another princess of that time.
Yeah, that has to be. We know she has a direct blood connection to Rauru and Sonia, so there has to have just been a kid off screen.
Yeah, I guess like that's what I've been thinking, because that's literally the only way it would work. But it would have been cool to like at least reference them somewhere. But yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about the ending. Let's finally get into it. What did you think of the ending?
So again, in terms of set piece, atmosphere, music, I was like stunned once I actually got to play. I was like, didn't realize. I thought this was just a cutscene, but suddenly I was like playing as these dragons were like fighting, intertwined, and with this absolutely phenomenal soundtrack playing. And I loved everything about it. For me, it was like the transition was this. I did the phenomena for the most part, and then I reached a specific geoglyph, like a specific memory. I think it is the one in Lurlen where Sonia, where what we talked about happened, and it really like excited me because we were like right about this, and it really picked up the pace, and so I did the other ones or whatever. And when I found out what happened to Zelda, whatever, I was like kind of depressed for like a little bit, because as much as it's like a sad and cool story and it ended up being cool, I was just a little upset with the reality of like Zelda essentially just like waiting again, but this time for like 100,000 years. I know she like wasn't conscious or whatever, but it wasn't like my favorite. I still think it worked great, and it got me like emotional about it, blah blah blah.
Yeah, I
But
liked it.
even back then, I still liked it. But even back then, I said I would think it's weird if she turns back now. Because like this huge sacrifice she did for the kingdom. And don't get me wrong, after all this amazing fight was done, and like she turns back, Link catches her heroic moment, she smiles, beautiful. I'm happy ending. After like 30 more seconds, I was like, okay, but this is like a little bit too convenient. Like, what even exactly just happened? Like, Sonya and Raru, I don't know if you have a better explanation for this, like, channeled their energy and like their time and light to like revert this.
It's bullshit.
But then why
the
was this so
explanation.
forbidden? Yeah, exactly.
It's bullshit.
Exactly.
Is what the explanation is. That's what the explanation. Okay, look. Let me say positive things. Let me say positive things before I get to that part. The Ganondorf boss fight is great. Really liked the Ganondorf boss fight. He turns. I liked. Well, even before that, I liked that all three of the Ganondorfs that we saw modeled were fightable. You know,
right? True.
Phantom Ganon. That's one of my biggest wishes. I really thought that we should have had a fight with Phantom Ganon. We even got Gloom Hands, which I didn't expect. The regular Ganondorf fight, which is a kind of tutorial for the actual Ganondorf fight, because you have to. It's a very well designed little tutorial, and the actual Ganon fight.
A Demon King. Yeah.
Comes out, and that was cool and hard, and well, as hard as it's going to be without it, it could have been harder, but whatever. It had great mechanics, because not only is he using Gloom actually was pretty awesome. You have to have these sunflowers to heal. You can only heal so much at a time.
True.
You have to come prepared. The Gloom is a good mechanic overall. It helps with the bullshit healing we had in Breath of the Wild.
True.
And then specifically in this fight, it's much better, because he'll take out your actual hearts, like your actual total health, not just your Gloom health. Like your actual hearts will disappear if you start getting hit by his powerful attacks, and they don't seem to come back. Like there doesn't seem to be a way to heal those. And so when I saw it, it's like, oh, that's beautiful, perfect, brilliant. Like finally, they making a final boss that's making you pay for mistakes. If anything, I think they should have been more severe with that cool mechanic. But fine, it's good. Do you think it's as good as Monk Monster Cause?
Okay, so in terms of difficulty, there's things I like about the Monk fight more that I disliked here. I like the epicness much more. It felt like a much more intimidating foe. Like he walks up slowly to you, do those sword attacks. You feel cool about having learned their patterns in the Phantom Ganon's fight. Like I got the parry timing for like the club version down, so I could punish him well. Mm-hmm. There was a mechanic, and I was going to ask you if you had this encountered this, because I didn't, and I even had a stream chat there, but I was so focused on the fight that I didn't read it. But in I think it's like the second phase or whatever of the demon, like the very last phase, he can like flurry rush your flurry rush. Have you had that happen? Right?
Yeah.
And then you can flurry rush his flurry rush. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know this. I just thought, okay, so he counters my flurry rush now. I get like punished here for getting the timing down. And that like, it wasn't immediately obvious to me that I can then flurry rush again, because I thought, okay, so this is just his reaction. Like he flurry rushes if I flurry rush. He just dodges it because he's so cool.
Yeah.
So I ended up using like my bow a lot, which made me feel like kind of this is kind of cheesy. So I wish that would have been again, because I've learned the speedrun and we do the flurry rush there all the time, I will get that experience now. But I wish that would have been a little bit more clear, and it made the fight like almost a little bit at the end, a little bit at that part, a little bit more one-dimensional. The big spectacle at the end still worked perfectly.
Actually, I don't think I really like that part, because it's so cool. It's so cool that he flurry rushes you, and then you have to flurry rush the flurry rush. What else are you gonna do? You guess you could block. And I was using the Master Sword the whole time, so I guess I could have blocked or parried. You can parry it. You can block it. You can dodge it. It was cool. I really liked that. It reminded me. Did you played Sekiro? Did you?
Yes.
In Sekiro where you're fighting Owl, and if you do a stabbing attack, he can Mikiri counter you.
Yeah. It's something that you didn't think anyone could do, basically.
Except for you. Yeah. The bad guy's so cool that he can do that thing except for you.
Right, and that's why I was like, oh, okay, so like even that doesn't work. That was like my reaction to it. Was like, okay, so he's so cool, he can do it. So even that doesn't work.
Mhm.
But I just missed it in that first encounter. But I think in general, if you get that, then it's very cool.
Right. There's also it's also this like reversal of a reversal thing that I think is very cool in Sekiro's I think like ultra hard DLC boss rush that they do.
Mm-hmm.
Genichiro so in the normal Genichiro fight, he like does a thunder sword. You can jump up in the air and use his thunder sword against him. And then I think in the hard version of the fight, when you do that, he counters your counter again, and you have to do it again to
Right.
It's just extremely cool. It's just extremely cool thing. So maybe I'm just a sucker for that kind of thing in boss fights. But I thought that was excellent.
Don't get me wrong. I liked that idea. I like that idea in general, and I wish I would have picked up on that because I think it's really cool. But just with the with like the stress of like all this gloom, and it was like I wish. I'm happy that I did stream the playthrough because for like having recorded it, looking back to it. But I feel like there's still like some extra pressure of like, oh, you don't want to like mess up.
Mhm.
So while having that as well, maybe that's why I didn't pick up on it immediately. But I understand that in general, when you do pick it up, it's a really cool idea.
Okay, so all right, so we basically agree. The fight happens. You beat him. He eats the tear, which I think is a great moment. He has the same like eye thing
Mhm.
that happens to Zelda, which I thought was great when it happened to Zelda.
Yeah.
These are one of the few moments. Okay, here's a criticism in general that I think that this part did very well. My criticism in general, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, in comparison to past Zelda games, is that in past Zelda games, they do a really good job with cinematography. Like they shoot their shots in a really interesting way. They focus on people's faces a lot of the time, even in random cutscenes with even in small cutscenes with like small encounters. In Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, a lot of what they do is they'll just have you talk to characters and the camera's fully controllable. You know, Link just kind of sits there passively.
True.
Occasionally he makes a gesture, at them. He's very stone faced. He's the living embodiment of that stone face from those islands, that emoji.
Yeah.
Least expressive Link out of all of them. Like, Twilight Princess Link got angry. Wind Waker was very expressive. Whatever. Cinematography. I really liked the shot where Zelda eats the tear and her eyes change and she becomes the dragon, and it's like this great sacrifice moment that she does. And then when Ganondorf does the same thing, paralleling what Zelda did to become eternal, like it matters so much of them that they're willing to give up. They don't care what they have to give up to engage in this eternal struggle. Really great moment. Then the actual fight with the dragon was incredible. It was so cool. It's a big spectacle thing, but I like big spectacles, like I've said before, in Elden Ring and in this game. And what I found really interesting. Did you notice that Zelda is coded excellently? Like she's really
That exactly. That surprised me. I had no issues with it at all. I will say again, and this is probably because breaking the game. When you try to do this without paragliders, sometimes she doesn't know what to do and you like fly into her. But in a normal playthrough, it feels crazy. And it feels like... That's why I was saying, like, as soon as the gameplay started, I didn't even realize I get to play this part because it seemed so choreographed. Like, it's like, okay, this is like a cutscene, right? But no, you're like in it. And that's how it felt like.
When I was fighting Ganondorf, I didn't even use the paraglider when I'm down there. Like, okay, so like you shoot him, you get the paraglider, you get at him, you shoot him a lot with the arrows. I guess you could do it differently, but that's how I did it. I shot him with the arrows as I was going down, and then I would go past him, and then I wouldn't use the paraglider anymore. I'm just like diving. I'm just free falling, and Zelda would just catch me. She just catch me.
Yeah, she picks you up. Yeah.
No matter what I'm doing, she seems to catch you. The whole time. It's great. She felt so cherished. I felt so protected. It's like, oh, she would catch you really well. I'm like, how did they do that? Like, people have pathing issues in like modern AAA games with NPCs. They can't follow you around correctly. They can't do anything. And they have this dragon catching me perfectly on her nose where I'm going like 200 miles a second downward.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I think that's I got the praise out of the way. It's great. Good stuff. I hate that she just comes back. And not only does she not come back, she doesn't have any trauma from it. She doesn't remember any of it. It's like everything's hunky-dory. There's no sacrifices at all. It almost makes her earlier sacrifices not worth anything.
Right.
It really... I said beforehand, like when I saw that, it's like, I know Zelda's going to come back. I know that they don't have the balls to make her take a sacrifice, but I'm still going to be upset when it happens.
I had this like theory that I liked more because I actually like the second they talked about the draconification in that one cutscene, that's when I realized that it's probably Zelda, the dragon, and that's also when I started having that idea, because I looked at our podcast, we talked about the fact that Gerudo, like it technically didn't have anything to do with this, but the lightning temple rises up in like a location called Dragon's Exile, and we talked about how Ganon on the mural has like dragon eyes, and in my mind, I already had that idea of that's what's gonna happen, that he's gonna like eat the tears like a final resort instead of Dark Beast this time. And that was like that all worked out in my mind. But basically I thought this felt like invalidated the second she could just like be her again.
Yeah.
But again, they wanted the happy end.
And they didn't give a satisfying explanation for why that happened. Oh, Laru and Sonia just changed her back. Their ghosts just changed her back at the end. It's like, oh, come on. It's like, not even, like, it's one thing to do it. It's another thing to do it and not give me a satisfying explanation as to why it happened. That's even worse. And look, I'm used to this from the Zelda team. team. In Twilight Princess, they actually did something a lot worse. Like, did you play Twilight Princess? You did, right?
Yeah, that was like my favorite before. Yeah.
So in Twilight Princess, Zant comes out. He like just defeats Link immediately. He destroys the light spirit that comes out, makes it back into the Dark World as soon as you clear the dungeon. You just finished doing this, and then he grabs Midna, and it just destroys everybody. Curses Link to be stuck in wolf form. Then, when Midna's not cooperating with him, he brings the light spirit back to bring the light world and forces Midna to stay there, mortally wounding her. And then, you have to rush to Hyrule Castle to try and get to Zelda. So
the big song,
the Midna's Lament is playing, the raining, going through Hyrule Castle itself. It's an incredibly good moment. And then you get to Zelda, and she sacrifices herself to give Midna the Triforce and keep Midna alive. And she dies. All right, she just dies. She just dissipates and she's gone. And then Nintendo just ignores it. It just ignores the fact that she sacrificed herself, that she dies, and then you see her at the very end in Ganondorf possessing her body.
Right.
It just makes no sense on any level at all. And it was awful. Like, it was even worse back then than what they did here. So I guess I'm used to it. But, they used to be more comfortable with sacrifice. Like an important part of the theme of order is that order requires constant, innumerable sacrifice. This is a thing in Dark Souls. This is a thing in Dark Souls. I don't know if you ever caught any of my Dark Souls or Elden Ring content, but I talk about their theming.
Yes.
And it requires constant, innumerable sacrifice. And in past Zelda games, Ocarina of Time, the sages were dead, or dead-ish, or some of them were dead. Saria dies. Darunia dies. Bruto probably dies. They all kind of die before they become sages, and they're dead. In Wind Waker, the sages also are required to power up the Master Sword, and the sages have to give up their lives to go live in the temple, and are either dead or just are unable to leave. So the bird girl can't be with her the prince of the Rito that she wants to be with. Sacrifices are necessary to preserve order. It's a very important part of this theme, and Nintendo team understands that. They understand they did it before. They understand it so much they had Zelda talk about the permanent change that this would do. That she sacrifices she has to make to give incremental power to Link, so that he can take out Ganondorf. They get that. They just don't have the stomach to see it through.
Exactly. Okay, hear me out. Alternative ending. This is what I thought it was going to be. Talking to my stream, this is what I would have preferred, and especially after talking to you, I would have preferred even more. We haven't really talked about this, that we both of us and like a lot of people kind of like and it still kind of happened in the game. connected Raru and Link. Like, of course, he uses his arm and he essentially plays the role of the Sage of Light, being like the leader of the new sages or whatever. But they didn't seem as closely connected as I thought, at least, for example, right? But what I would have loved is if the dragon fight happens the same way, but dragons are eternal, right? He made that sacrifice. You cannot, like, kill a dragon or whatever. But Link could have sealed him, giving up his own life. And I know they would have never done this, right?
Yeah.
But like this is what would perfectly like close the cycle. They saved the kingdom again. This time Link is the one sealing. There will be a new hero in the future rising up again and a new princess or whatever. And then they could have been together in the spirit realm. Just like Sonya and Raru were or whatever. We still would have gotten like a half happy ending or whatever.
Yeah.
I would have preferred that personally.
And it would have paralleled Raru's sacrifice initially.
Exactly.
Yeah. Further cementing the whole dragon spinning after each other. Yeah. No, that would have been great. Oh, hang on, I forgot one sacrifice. Midna at the end of Twilight Princess. You know, something has to be given up.
She, like, leaves.
Something needs to be given up to preserve the things that you gained. Midna has to go.
Yeah.
And it's a particularly like a lot of people like Midna. Many people like Midna more than like Zelda or any of the other characters in that game. So, you know, that would have been a much better ending. I think one of the things I thought of that I would have preferred was the ending happens and then that goes down and Zelda just doesn't come back and she stays a dragon. And then you see her floating away sadly, and like Link just looks off into this. He's by a tree. He's on a hill. He's looking off distance. He just got done helping with the restoration that he sees that, and then he sees Zelda out in the sky just flying away, and he has to just live with that. And because order requires sacrifice, endless and continuous sacrifice to preserve it.
That would have been very powerful. Like, imagine he like returns to the house or whatever in like the last shot, and you see like Zelda fly like in the back. Yeah, I definitely would have liked that, but I know that they would have never done this.
Yeah. So none of the sages die. You know, none of the sages have to sacrifice anything meaningful. Zelda doesn't, and I guess they've always been protective of Zelda, so they weren't going to do it to her. But none of them do. And they used to do it, you know, they used to make someone sacrifice something. The sages, Midna, even they had these feelings of loss in previous Zelda games, even in the very Ocarina of Time when you're leaving your childhood home. That's an important step in the hero's journey, like you're leaving the place of your belonging, leaving your home. And Saria is out there on the bridge before you leave, and she's like, "You're leaving, aren't you?" And you see like this close-up shot of her sad face because she knows you have to go. She knows you're not like them. You have important things to do, and she gives you the ocarina. Yeah. It's really important. Like, it's really impactful, especially for a kid that has never experienced these weird feelings of loss that they can't even explain yet. It burns into their memories because it's a powerful moment. Where is that? Give me that.
Yeah, and I guess the only people that really sacrificed him, it was really only Raru, who essentially like sacrificed himself to like save the safety seal Ganondorf for now, so that Link can do that in the future. Sonya wasn't really like, it wasn't a sacrifice, it was just like murder.
Yeah.
Essentially from the evil mastermind Ganon or whatever. But yeah, I feel like I guess again we both had, I think, different ideas for the ending, but the one thing that just felt really strange is he just suddenly turns back without explanation just so we can get a smile. I will admit,
the smile was good. The smile was good.
It was better. They definitely made it much better than the Breath of the Wild smile. It was nice, but like, yeah, it's still eventually was like, okay, it was a bit too convenient, no?
And also they did a good job with the catching her. Like you have to, she's falling down, she's in her Zelda form, and you're going to catch her, and you're like trying to reach her arm, and it parallels at the very beginning where you can't get her.
But this time you
grab her arm and it works. And like there's this promotional material that I use on my streams that it's like Link falling and it's and Zelda falling, and it's at the very beginning. They're wearing their beginning clothing. And then it parallels at the end. So little did we know they showed what the ending looked like at the before the game released.
True.
So it was nice where it was nice. There were problems. That's all I'll say.
No, and I mean, I think that's a testament to how much we enjoyed the game, that we can already pick these things out because we've already played it so much, had such a good time that it's easy to pick out the couple of things they can still improve in the future. But overall, like I said, I mean, for me, and it could still be the recency bias because I'm still like all in it and I still have stuff to do. And maybe in 2 years I'll be like, okay, I did like Elden Ring slightly more, but right now it's like at the top. It was an amazing experience.
So at the top of any game, casual wise?
I think so. For me, it was basically between Outer Wilds.
Oh,
yeah. Between Outer Wilds, Elden Ring, and then this one came into the list. The other ones in the list were like Hollow Knight and the first Breath of the Wild.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the top 3 now are this, Outer Wilds, and Elden Ring. And Outer Wilds is just like something completely different. I think that will always be the one thing that's it's just like so different and special that it almost doesn't count. Like it's like something else.
Yeah.
But for like the casual like exploring RPG game, it's like this is at the top right now. Yeah.
We got to talk about Outer Wilds in a moment, but before that, I want to say that there was a long moment, like a big middle chunk of the game, where this was my favorite Zelda game. Yeah. Before I finished it, before anything else, I was sitting there and I was like, I know for a fact that the experience I'm having right now playing through this game and seeing these spectacles and going through all of this stuff and just spending hours and hours trying to progress and not being able to progress because I'm getting distracted and I'm loving exploring the world so much. This is better, more fun than any other Zelda game that I've ever had. Like no dungeon compares to the exploration in Tears of the Kingdom. And while the actual dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom I think are still crap, the actual exploration, every other part of the game trumps those dungeons, trumps all dungeons that have ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And like the experience, like I'm not saying specifically the caves or the depths or the sky islands, all of it together, the experience, the interconnectedness of it was better. It was better. However, I have to bring it down because story is so important to me. Like theming, story is such an important thing. It goes back down to number 2. It's number 2 favorite Zelda game. However, interestingly enough, Breath of the Wild is now like bottom. It's now at the bottom.
Yeah, that's what that game does, really. I mean, that's like one of the most common takes I see. Like, looks like a tech demo now. It's like so true in many aspects. That's just what happens if you make this game.
It's weird.
But yeah,
it's weird.
I agree.
Value-wise, it's like what game would I replay in the past? Like I'd replay Wind Waker. I'd replay any of the old Zelda games. I'd play some of the ones that I haven't played, like the first one. And so like replay value wise, I think they all top Breath of the Wild because I just maybe I'll feel differently after some time passes and stuff because I like I said, the loathsomeness is something that Breath of the Wild did better than Tears of the Kingdom. But I just don't see it. I can't think of a reason to play Breath of the Wild over Tears of the Kingdom ever again.
Yeah, for me the only thing is like the crazy speedrun stuff or whatever that I would ever revisit it, that you can like move in such crazy ways, but that's like literally it, basically. So yeah, definitely completely agree. But so what was your number 1, Ocarina of Time?
I oscillate between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, but yes.
Okay.
I think Ocarina of Time has the greatest hero's journey out of all of them. I think it knocked it out of the park in a lot of the mechanics that it established for the series. A lot of even things like cinematography that I talk about, they did such a fantastic job in it. And I guess I'm giving it points for innovating. And it really did. It made the lock-on system. Like the lock-on system used in Dark Souls, the lock-on system made in everything. That's Ocarina of Time. It invented it.
Right.
So yeah, I give it a lot of points for innovation in a lot of different areas. So I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about Outer Wilds now that you mentioned it. Do you have anything you want to talk about before we go into Outer Wilds?
No, I think we wrapped it up at a good point as well, talking about the ending and like potential just like Zelda series in general. We could make a quick Outer Wilds excursion.
Yeah. Let me just also say, disclaimer, like, we loved the game. Like, any criticism. The last podcast I had with Monster Maze, did you listen to that?
I listened to the part with like the Gerudo statues is what I got to, because that's what I was interested in, because obviously he was working on that the video about those, basically.
So what I found interesting about that podcast is that I would look at the comments, and the people in the comment section to that podcast would like think that I would like hate it, like or some of them was like, why are you defending? why are you defending it? Like some of them would be like, why are you defending this game so much? Why do you like this game? This game sucks. And then some other people in the comment sections are like, why are you criticizing it so much? Why do you hate it so much?
Right,
why do you like this? Why do you oscillate? And I'm like, what the hell? Like, where are you reading into this? What the hell?
Yeah. I don't get it. I mean, I feel like I got that impression from you, and I think if you're like a normal observer, speaking of observers in Outer Wilds, I think it came through, at least for me, how still, like, at the same time as we're talking about that, how like passionate and like we both are about the game, and what a good time we have with it, or had with it, and will still have in the future. But that doesn't change the fact that we can't like step back and like reflect on things that could have been better or were great.
Right. Yeah, I feel like people just they come in with like preconceived notions of what your opinion is, and they latch on to the things that confirm that opinion, and they just ignore all the things that don't confirm. So all the praise I give it, all the gushing about everything I say about it, just goes over the head like it didn't even happen.
Yeah.
And only the things that I say that are critical, and so they think I'm being critical. Oh, that's what he really thinks. So all the things that he said before, that he doesn't really think that, but then the super critical remarks. Those are the important parts to take away from this conversation. Like, no, what the, no. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we conveyed, that we love the game. It's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so Outer Wilds. I saw the video that you made a little bit before Tears of the King came out. It's like 6 days before the game came out, and you recommended people to play Outer Wilds, and I thought that was the absolute worst thing you could have ever possibly done. I thought you did an absolute disservice to these people, because first of all, you're not going to finish Outer Wilds in 6 days. Like, maybe you can, but like you'd be rushing. Like you'd be like, you have that time limit in the back of your head, that you got to play Tears of the Kingdom. And Outer Wilds is such an incredible game, like such a magnificent game, so unique, that like you need 3 days to recover from the reeling of the ending. So even if they manage to beat it.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I personally, it took me, I think, like 5 days or so, but it was, again, it's different. And sometimes I need to be reminded of this, that other people have like lives and like jobs, and maybe they play games for like 3 hours in the evening, and that I'm super privileged to like play them for much longer, because I got sucked into the world so hard after the first session that I literally just played it like 10 hours plus in these next 5 days, upcoming days. And what it did help me even then, when I was avoiding the leaks again, that's why I even brought it up, was I was able to just dive back into it, watching people play through it, and was able to still take my thoughts completely off of potentially looking into like Tears of the Kingdom stuff, because it's like such a good thing to get hooked on.
It was so wonderful, isn't it?
What you're saying, though,
isn't it? It's such a good game. Really, so many of my friends that I've gotten into it is like, oh, their favorite game of all time. And when I bring up other games that they love, they struggle to place it, because it's such a unique experience. Like they struggle to.
That's what I just had.
Yeah. So everybody on here should play Outer Wilds. I've literally never heard anyone say, "Oh, it sucks. It's terrible. I didn't get it."
Yeah. And maybe you feel like that at one particular time, but once you
power through, keep going.
Yeah, it'll be worth it. Exactly.
Okay, I think we covered everything really well. This was a great podcast.
Yeah, I had a fun time. Thank you for having me again.
No problem. All right, let's wrap it up. This has been the Yggdrasil podcast. Thank you all very much for watching.